In the absence of a quorum of the members of the Victorville City Council, the city clerk is calling to order the adjourned meeting of the City Council of the City of Victorville and the City Council sitting as the Library Board of Trustees, Southern California Logistics Rail Authority, Southern California Logistics Airport Authority, successor agency to the Victorville Redevelopment Agency, the Victorville Joint Powers Financing Authority, the Victorville Water District, and the Victorville Housing Trust. It has been determined that the items that were scheduled for closed session at 5 p.m. are no longer necessary, and therefore there is no need for a closed session meeting at 5. Therefore, the 5 o'clock meeting is adjourned, and the regular session scheduled at 6 p.m. will convene at that time.
I'm going to turn this microphone on. Call this meeting in order. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Garcia.
Here.
Councilmember Kennedy. Councilmember Vai's absence is noted. Mayor Pro Tem McEachran.
Here.
Mayor Cox.
Here. We did not have a closed session, but City Attorney, do you have any comments to make on that?
Correct. There were two agendized items, but we did not need to go into closed session today, and there was no quorum for the 5 o'clock meeting.
The next item, if I could have your attention, we're going to have the invocation by Minister Alan Thompson of the Victor Christian Center, who's going to come up. And then, immediately following that, we're going to have the presentation of the colors and the pledge by Girl Scout Troop 1414 from the High Desert Girl Scouts. And if you'll remain standing after the invocation. Welcome, Master.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you. We thank you for your blessing. We thank you for your love. We thank you for your grace, and we thank you for your mercy. Father, we pray as tonight, the council members meet tonight, Father, that your will be done in the house today, Father. That any decision, any comment, any remark, Father, that's made tonight, Father, is led and guided by your hand and by your words, Father. That everyone will know in this room, Father, that it is you, Father, that makes the decisions for over this council, Father. And Father, we pray for the city of Victorville, Father, and that every decision that is made about Victorville and concerning Victorville comes from you, Father. Father, may each one of us in this room decrease while you increase in this house today, Father, and that everything that we do and everything that we stand for is all about you, Father. We thank you, we love you, and we honor you. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
Color guard, attention. Will the audience please rise? Color guard, advance. Color guard, halt. Prepare to post colors. Post colors. Color guard, honor your colors. Please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Color guard, dismissed.
And now they have a project to present to the council. Is that correct? And before you start, I forgot to mention the troop leaders, Scott and Laura Azevedo. Thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. We are Troop 1414 of the San Gorgonio Council High Desert Region. The Bronze Award is an adventure in leadership for more than 500,000 Girl Scouts every year. It is the highest honor of achievement a Girl Scout junior can earn. It involves teamwork, exploring our communities, making a plan, and putting it all into motion.
Approximately 11 months ago, we set out to explore our community, starting with our school, family, and friends. We soon discovered how little some people knew about energy, how to conserve it, and how to prepare your family at home in the event of a local emergency or disaster.
During the course of our journey, we discovered the need to get the word out about being prepared for emergencies at home. As a troop, we spent countless hours researching and brainstorming on what it takes to be prepared. We gathered information and put it all together and came up with a plan to raise awareness with our communities. Our plan was to publish a brochure on emergency preparedness in the home, hold several events to promote our plan, and then place these brochures at our school and local businesses around the community. We hope that the contents of this brochure will help people get started as they prepare their family, friends, co-workers, and community plan and prepare.
We encourage everyone to pass this information on and share it with others. Our goal is to reach as many people as possible and make the world a better place by taking action and impacting our community with our project.
Be informed. Make a plan. Build a kit. Get involved. Thank you. We would now like to answer any questions the council might have.
I just want to say what a great job. Thank you very much. Thank the Girl Scouts and thank your troop leaders. Thank you. I have two proclamations. The first proclamation is a presentation. I understand that Joe Zaccaro is going to accept that. I'm not going to read all of this, but I'm going to read the major portions of it. Whereas the City of Victorville is committed to ensuring the safety and security of those living in and visiting the city, whereas fire is a serious public safety concern both locally and nationally, and homes are the locations where people are at greatest risk from fire. Whereas home fires killed more than 2,500 people in the United States in 2011. When I saw that, it surprised me, but I know we have less fires than we used to, but it's still a statistic that we need to pay attention to. According to the National Fire Protection Association and fire departments in the United States, they responded to 370,000 home fires, whereas cooking is the leading cause of home fires in the United States, where the fire departments responded to more than 156,000 annually between 2007 and 2011. Whereas 2 of every 5 home fires start in the kitchen. Unattended equipment was a factor in 1/3 of the reported cooking fires, and 57% of the reported non-fatal home cooking fire injuries occurred when the victims tried to fight the fire themselves. Whereas children under 5 face a higher risk of non-fire burns associated with cooking than being burned in cooking fires, Victorville residents should stay in the kitchen when frying food on the stove tops, keep a 3-foot kid-free zone around cooking areas, and keep everything that can catch fire away from the stove tops. Whereas working smoke alarms cut the risk of dying in reported home fires in half, residents who have planned and practiced home fire escape plans are more prepared and will therefore be more likely to survive a home fire. So with that said, whereas Victorville's first responders, and I'm sure that is something that everyone thinks of the fire department. When you talk about the first responders, we automatically know who we're talking about. So now, therefore, we present this to Joe Zaccaro on behalf of the firefighters for Fire Prevention Week throughout the city, and urge all people in the city of Victorville, to check their kitchens for fire hazards and use safe cooking practices during Fire Prevention Week 2013.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
We lost our photographer.
I just wanted to add, this year's theme is kitchen fire safety. Just be careful what's going on in the kitchen. As Mr. Cox said, make sure you have an area around there where it's a kid-free zone, as well as remove combustibles. Be careful the clothing that you're wearing. Most importantly is make sure you have a working smoke alarm in your house. Smoke alarms will save your life in the event that there's a fire there. It'll activate, alert you, allowing you to get out of the house in a reasonable time. So on behalf of all the men and women of San Bernardino County Fire Department, and especially my staff in the city of Victorville, thank you.
I have been told that there are more and more women in the workplace and more men are cooking. And the section about more fires occurring, we cut that out. The next proclamation is for the Desert Communities United Way. Julie Norton, if you'd come down, please. And your entourage. I will read this proclamation. Whereas the Desert Communities United Way is a nonprofit organization responding to human needs in the high desert, and whereas Desert Communities United Way ensures the provisions of basic necessities to underserved populations of the high desert, and whereas Desert Communities United Way is a responsible steward of its resources, and whereas Desert Communities United Way supports easy access to health and social services for vulnerable residents of the high desert, whereas Desert Communities United Way helps at-risk children succeed in school and in life, and whereas Desert Communities United Way is a leading agency in the high desert for after-disaster response, and whereas Desert Communities United Way develops opportunities for volunteers to create positive changes, and whereas Desert Communities United Way has supported the high desert communities for more than 50 years. It's a great deal of pleasure to present this proclamation to the Desert Communities United Way. Who do I present this to? You?
Thank you so much for recognizing our work in the high desert. We really appreciate it. I'm Chris Briggs. I'm Executive Director for Desert Communities United Way, and these lovely women here are part of our Board of Directors. I'll have them introduce themselves. Is that okay?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Council, for this recognition. Jennifer Silvestri, Senior Director of Public Affairs for Kaiser Permanente, and a very proud and happy United Way board member.
I'm Marcia Wyo with Alaska USA Federal Credit Union, and also a proud board member of the Desert Communities United Way.
Hello, I'm Lorena Flores with U.S. Bank Branch Manager, and we appreciate you guys having us here today.
Teresa Shellcroft, Vice President, Desert Communities United Way, and thank you very much.
Yeah. At the last city council meeting, we discussed addressing the council. We discussed the meetings. As those of you who are here know, we've tried to get a lot of publicity out to start the meetings at 6 p.m. rather than 7 p.m. and try to get through the agenda. We have so many people that make a presentation and leave. There's no good time for any particular subject, but we're trying to handle the business of everyone. The only major change you're going to see from the time is that the individuals who want to address the city council will now be at the end of the meeting rather than the beginning of the meeting. And I have 2 cards. Still fill out a card, present it to the clerk, and those will be handled at the end of the agenda. City clerk. Have changes, amendments, or anything new for the agenda to the council?
There are no revisions to tonight's agenda.
We will then go to item B1, which is a public hearing to hear arguments for and against approving the Rosenberg's Rules of Orders as set forth in ordinance number 2301. And we will also adopt well, assuming we'll adopt, unless it's adverse during the hearing, the Rosenberg Rules of Orders for the Water Board. Although it's a different agenda item, when it comes time to approve, we don't have a public hearing for that, but can we take a motion if necessary so that we don't redo this later?
We certainly can consider all of the items in the motion, and you also have one for the Water District, for the successor agency, I believe, and the Joint Powers Authority, is that correct?
Housing Trust.
And the Housing Trust. So all of those items can be combined, and we can check the item numbers. I'd first open the public hearing, close the public hearing, and then have a motion to consider all of those items.
All right. I will, at this time, any questions from the council members in regard to B1? If not, I'm going to open the public hearing. I have no cards. I have no individuals requested to speak. Seeing no one approach the dais, I'm going to close the public hearing. Action by the council.
Mayor Cox, I do need to read the title of the ordinance first on this item.
All right.
An ordinance of the City Council of the City of Victorville amending Section 2.20.170 of Chapter 2.20 of the Victorville Municipal Code, adopting Rosenberg's Rules of Order.
Can we be clear on which items would be companion to this?
Find it. I'm not sure. Motion would also include item B1, D3, and I believe there's another one. Maybe not.
D1, D3,
the
and
other items, I think we're changing the time of the
Yeah,
meeting.
so it's
Maybe
just,
that's, yeah.
so it's essentially B1 and D3 at this point.
All right. Thank you.
And actually, D14, there is a resolution for the various advisory committees that would also adopt Rosenberg's rules. So D14 and D3.
So to be clear, the motion then would be to adopt the ordinance, waive further reading, and then also approve agenda items D3 and D14.
And there's a motion by Councilmember Kennedy and a second by Mayor Pro Tem McEachron. And that would be to waive further reading and introduce the ordinance and adopt the resolutions. Motion carries with Councilmember Vias absent.
Next item is the consent calendar. We have the consent calendar. We have C1, C2, C3, C4, C5. Is there any request to pull any of those items for discussion? If not, they can be approved with one motion.
C5 and C7.
Okay.
For just a brief discussion.
C5 and C7?
Yes, sir.
Is it your motion then to approve this consent calendar with the exception of C5 and C7?
Yes, it is.
You need a second?
Motion by Councilmember Kennedy, second by Mayor Pro Tem McEachron. Motion carries with Councilmember Vyas absent.
Councilmember Kennedy.
Doug, who should I address these questions to? I don't see Adele here.
Dell is here.
Adele is here? Oh, there
Probably
she is.
be the best one to answer these questions at this point.
Adele, I'm looking at the investment report, the first page, the summary page. Victorville Joint Powers Authority and Southern California Logistics Airport Authority, their cash balances only include assets held by third-party trusts, meaning they don't have bank balances.
Those assets held by the third party are the reserve accounts that we have held
Right.
with them. Yeah.
But neither of these entities have bank balances, operating bank accounts, or are they?
The Joint Powers Financing Authority does not. SCLA does have some, not,
I'm wondering if they were negative or.
That would be included in the, in the bank account under the City of Victorville. We can split that out if you want to do it that way.
And under the Victorville redevelopment, the successor agency, we've got about $33 million there. Are these our funds? Are these funds that we control, or are we just holding them for the state, or what's the status of those?
The $31 million includes monies that, when we got the settlement agreement with Carter Burgess, we were, that $22 million of that was, put into, went back to SCLA, the bond, issue for SCLA. And so we are in the process, and we'll be bringing that back next council meeting to set up a LAIF account, because we don't have a LAIF fund for that SCLA specifically. And so they were put in there until we have that available and ready for us.
So that will move to an SCLA account?
Yes.
Okay.
I thought that amount would be held by the trustee for the bonds and automatically reduce the balance, but it just be held in an account. No,
that determination has not been made of what to do with that, and so it will be held there until it's, until there's a determination on what is to be done with that.
The money you may be thinking of, Mr. Mayor, is the money that went directly to pay down the bonds. This is actually the money that came back to the utility, VMUS, that then repaid the water district, the loan that the water district had given them, which then was used to repay a loan from SCLAA housing bonds to the water district. So that's why it's bounced a little bit, but it's headed in the right direction.
The $30 million of that $54 million did pay down the debt on the Victorville Joint Powers Financing Authority debt, the $83 million.
And I think this is all sort of tied together to the SCLA funds. Do you anticipate that we're going to have a shortfall on our December payment to the bond custodian? And if so, any idea what it's going to be?
There will be a shortfall again, for our debt service on the two bond issues, the subordinate debt, the 2007 and the 2008A. And so I think it's probably a couple of $1 million that, because it will be all of the interest, and the principal payments on both the 2007 and the 2008. We will have enough in reserves on the 2007 to pay the interest portion, but not the principal portion.
Yeah. That has been running $3 million?
Each year, assuming there's some growth in property tax or property values, it should reduce. We probably have a couple more years of pain until we finally get back to break even, and then we've got to make up what we've been behind.
I mention that because this has now gone on for 3 years. We've known it's going to happen. It's not a mystery. It's not a surprise. We're going to have a default situation in December, as we have for the last 2 years. And I hope the Daily Press covers it in a sensible way and not splash a headline that says we're in default again, that kind of stuff. We know this is going to happen because of the property tax deficiencies. Okay, that was all I had, Mr. Mayor, on number 7. On 5, I'm sorry.
Okay. Item C7.
Don't go away. I do. On C7, the quarterly report, some great information. I really appreciate it. At the bottom of page 2, when you talk about the sales tax and a final fourth quarter reconciliation that's going to be done. I assume it hasn't been done now because we don't have the information.
That's correct.
Is that reconciliation likely to increase our sales tax, decrease it, or do we just not know?
We just don't
We
know.
don't know.
Sometimes it's increased it, sometimes it's decreased it.
Okay. Over on the next page, on page 3, general fund, budgeted expenditures of $47,678,000 and actuals through June of $47,083,000, $600,000 better than budget in the general fund. Outstanding work. Any thoughts, any guesses about possible audit adjustments that may change any of that?
I hope not.
Yeah, I do too. I thought maybe you might know of something.
Not at this time.
Over on the next page, on page 4, I hope everybody takes time to look at this. I mean, this breaks apart our different enterprise funds. Solid waste is, which of these covers the treatment plant?
That's under sanitary sewer.
Sanitary and sewer.
That's correct.
Okay. 15 million in revenues, 12.3 in expenses. No, actual expenses of 9.9, 10 million.
Right. A lot of capital projects haven't been completed, and so that's why you'll see in some of the enterprise funds that those capital projects, are anticipated. Sometimes they don't get completed.
So is that telling us that out of that project, we're generating $4 or $5 million a year to spend on capital projects?
Not entirely, no, because that also includes the sewer collection system as well, not just the plant. It's the
Okay.
plant plus the collection system that belongs to the city.
Okay. Water district, no surprises there. The municipal utilities, that's a very distorted number. You got 33 million in revenues, but 22 million of that is from the Carter Burgess settlement. One-time deal, take it out. We've got about 11.5 or 11.4 in revenues and 10.3 in actual expenses. That means the municipal utilities are generating about a $1.1 million surplus. Revenues over expenses. Expenses include interest, but they don't include the bond payment.
That's correct.
What is the bond payment going to be? How close are we to covering that principal payment with this surplus?
We are covering it the current fiscal year. I think we just missed the mark last fiscal year, depending on where the final expenses sort out. But this fiscal year, we actually cover everything, cover all costs for Victorville Municipal Utility Services.
Including the principal payment on the
Including
bond?
the principal payment on the bonds.
the
That's largely because of a 5-year prepayment that was done as part of the Carter and Burgess settlement. When that goes away, we'll get back into a situation where it's tight at best. That's one reason why we're actively pursuing new business to come to town that can take electric service from our utility and increase our profitability, for lack of a better term.
And I point that out just to make people aware as best we can. It's a complicated financial issue, but for all the heat we've taken on the disaster at the Foxborough plant, the fact is the Carter Burgess settlement cured a large portion of that, and the buying and selling of electricity that we are now doing in that entity is going to cover eventually all the rest of that loss. So I'm fairly confident that we will recover through this utility organization the loss on that project.
Our principal payment grows annually.
Yeah, well, okay.
So our electric sales need to grow annually as well.
Eventual is a relative term. Put it in context. The last thing I really want to point out, the airport authority, the airport operations, you'll notice 8.5 million in revenue, 7.2 million in expenses. This is the operation of the airport. This isn't the retirement of debt, but it does include the payment of interest. Am I right?
No.
Doesn't include the interest.
That's down on the next line where it says the airport debt service.
Okay. Right. Okay. And that one we have about 20 million in revenues and 16 in expenses.
But with that, the 16 million.
That doesn't include the principal piece.
That's correct.
Okay. Point is, airport operations generating about a $1.3 million surplus. I just think everybody needs to know that.
Yes.
They're doing very, very well.
Just need to add another column, encumbered or trust. You almost need to add another column of encumbered or held in trust. Because if you have a contract and you haven't finished the contract, it looks like you have a surplus of funds when in fact it's already encumbered or contracted, and so you may not have any funds at all.
Is that significant?
Well, it could be at times. I don't know that it is right now, but keep in mind this is not a year-end report. This is your quarterly financial report, so it's only going to include those things through the end of the quarter.
Yeah.
So if there are encumbered dollars, it wouldn't necessarily appear in a quarterly financial report.
And this one is for the year end, June 30th of 2013, and so there are very little encumbrances left from last fiscal year.
But we're generating about $3.4 million in excess in property taxes over and above the interest cost to cover the principal payments? Is that about right? Out of the debt service fund? The expenses are interest?
The expenses are interest, and then we, including, then we have a $3.4 million on top of that. So we're, we're bringing in enough revenues. Of course, we're not, this doesn't include those defaults that we've had. So we haven't brought in enough to cover the defaults.
Yeah, that we know. Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve the last two items.
Okay. C5, C7.
Motion by Councilmember Kennedy, second by Councilmember Garcia. Motion carries with Councilmember Valles absent.
We'll now go to written communications, D1. Request City Council approve amendment number 1 to the Green Tree Boulevard, Yates Road, Yucca-Loma Road contract among the City of Victorville, Town of Apple Valley, and County of San Bernardino. There's no questions?
Mr. Mayor,
We have a question.
In reading this, I was kind of stunned by, if we've seen this before, I'm really surprised. The widening of Yates Road, the extension of that pattern down Green Tree to Yates and then widening Yates Road, is that seriously on our list of things to do in the future after we've gotten Nisqually? So.
Well, I believe, and Brian can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this portion of Yates is actually the portion that is east of Hesperia Road. So I believe Green Tree Road stops at Hesperia Road. I see Brian shaking.
Yeah, because that Yates is the responsibility of the county.
Was.
Oh, Yates on the other side of Hesperia Road, not the Yates.
You mean the other side of the tracks?
Yep. Go ahead, Brian.
Okay.
Correct us all, Brian.
Explain right here.
What this agreement amendment is for, it's really just memorializing what's already happened. Because if you go back in history a few years, Apple Valley was the lead on an environmental document. That document covered all the way from Apple Valley Road, bringing a bridge across the river to Yates Road, which goes around the north side of Spring Valley Lake, widening Yates Road, and then extending Green Tree, building a new bridge over the railroad tracks, extending Green Tree to connect to Hesperia Road. There was one environmental document that covered that whole stretch.
My mistake, Brian. I'm thinking of Yates Road on this side. I could not make the engineering work.
And so the county and Victorville and Apple Valley, they all contributed some match money to a federal grant. And it really already happened, but the county wanted to memorialize this in an agreement just to record how much everyone spent on their match money. And I'll get to the other projects a little bit later when we talk about the Riverwalk.
Okay. No more questions? Chair is open for motion.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McEachron, second by Councilmember Kennedy. Member Kennedy, can I get a vote from you? Thank you. Motion carries with Councilmember Valles absent.
D2, request City Council reject all bids for the Seneca roadway improvement from Hesperia Road to Woodland Drive project. My understanding is that they came in substantially higher than was expected, and at this point, request the council reject all bids. Staff, if we reject the bids, what's your next step?
We made some changes on the project to try to bring it within the scope. There's a developer contribution that was for about $174,000. And so we didn't put in the ultimate paving section. We made a couple other modifications, and we're hoping that it will be a lot closer to the developer fee so that we have to put very little additional funding into the project to finish it.
Do we have a motion?
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McEachran, second by Councilmember Kennedy. Motion carries with Councilmember Vyas absent.
Item 3 is the item that we handled with Rosenberg's rules. We handled that after the public hearing. Item number 4, no item submitted. Number 5, no item submitted. 6, letter of agreement with Pacific Aviation Group. The recommendation from Mr. Metzler is that the Honorable Board of Directors approve, number 1, entering into a letter of agreement between Pacific Aviation Group, LLC, and Southern California Logistics Airport Authority, and 2, approve an additional appropriation in the amount not to exceed $30,700 in the form of a rent credit to fund repairs, and 3, authorize the Assistant Executive Director to execute the agreement. I have a question that I want to, it has come up before. This is to the city attorney. Some time ago, when I was under intense questioning for a situation, the question was asked, who's authorized to sign? And I indicated that the mayor, on behalf of the council, the city clerk is the city clerk, the city attorney is the city attorney, and I was shown a document and asked then when the council authorizes another individual or a staff person, is it by resolution and is there a separate authorization to authorize that? When I came back after that, I outlined a list of everyone who should sign contracts. And we have followed that, except I do notice under certain situations with some of our entities, we are having staff people to sign, and I question that.
Certainly, the preferred method is to have the mayor sign all contracts that bind the city unless you basically, as a council, delegate that somebody else can sign certain types of contracts.
Well, we have the risk manager, the city clerk, the attorney, and the mayor.
They sign as to having approved the form and the content of the agreement. They cannot bind the city. The only person that can bind the city is either the mayor or whoever the city delegates to sign the document.
So the authorization, in this case of a staff member to sign, isn't for binding purposes, but for corrective purposes, to ascertain the correctness of the contract?
Well, typically, the risk manager and the city attorney always check as to the form of the contract and the validity of the contract being a binding contract. They, however, do not have the authority to bind the entity. Again, it's the mayor or whoever the council delegates to be the signatory to actually bind the council.
Only because it had come up, and we did change the procedure some 3 years ago. And occasionally this comes up, and I wondered if we needed to address it or if it's perfectly okay the way it is. I have no objection. I just want to make sure when a higher authority is questioning us that we're on solid ground.
Well, the way to resolve it in this instant would be, assuming you want to approve this, would be to authorize execution on behalf of the council by Keith Metzler, Assistant Executive Director.
I have no objections, Councilman.
I don't either, but I would, my recollection is even when we've done this, these documents have been put before the mayor. When I was mayor, I signed them. So unless something has changed, because that is what you directed when you were the city manager, even though this language is included here, I believe staff is always, my recollection.
Keith, you're not the Assistant Executive Director, are you?
Technically, Mr. Robertson, the city manager, assumes the role of the executive director. Certainly, you could modify the motion here and authorize the mayor to sign this document. That would be entirely appropriate.
The primary purpose for this, and we've done it in the past for other transactions, is just for the sake of expediency, to get these documents turned around as quickly as possible and not have to wait too long to get signatures done. In this particular case, and in others, it affects either going out for bid or, in this case, modifying billing systems, and we'd like to be able to do that as quickly as we possibly can. There's no preference whether it's myself, the executive director, or if the mayor would like to retain that. We're certainly fine with that. Certainly just trying to expedite the process the best we can to get these transactions effectuated.
If it's your pleasure, then I would recommend that you make the motion and we can amend the document to have it executed by the mayor. Or actually, it would be chairman of the airport authority, which is your dual role.
I have no objections either way. It's just that that issue did come up on two different occasions.
It certainly should always be the mayor to sign documents unless the council delegates otherwise.
Okay.
Haven't we in the past done the mayor and or certain situations?
In situations you have delegated the airport executive director to execute documents, or in this case, since Keith basically has run the airport, you have delegated authority for Keith to execute documents. You can do that as part of your motion, as part of the resolution. Oftentimes, it'll set forth actually in a resolution approving an amendment or a lease document who you're authorizing to sign. So there's a delegation of authority to sign the document on your behalf.
In this case, the staff recommendation has three parts to it. The council, if you would prefer not to have the assistant executive director execute the agreement, you could simply move staff recommendations 1 and 2 and abandoning number 3.
Well, I want to state for the record, I'm not opposed to that, except that this apparently is an issue with a higher authority based upon my deposition. And who authorized so-and-so to sign such a document, and where's the resolution authorizing it as a separate document?
Well, here
There must be some basis.
Right. Here again, you have a staff report. The recommendation would be to authorize and delegate the signing authority to the assistant executive director of the airport. Again, it makes no difference if you would like to sign it as the chairman, and we want to do all documents that way, that would be appropriate as well. Again, for expediency, we sometimes in the resolutions or in the staff reports recommend that signing authority be delegated to another individual.
Well, we recently had some documents, I don't know if it was last meeting, but recent, and we followed this, and we did adopt those. And I thought about it at the time and then got busy. So my actual recommendation is to follow the staff recommendation and to do this and have all those signatures plus the assistant director, but I'd like the city attorney to look into that issue because of specifically the federal government's concern on who has the authority, when did they get it, and where's the document that says they had the authority, because there are some people who've signed documents that denied that they even knew what the document said because they relied on. And my belief is you can't do that.
And I would agree. And again, typically, if it's not the mayor signing who can bind on behalf of council, the mayor individually cannot bind the council. It has to be a council action. The council typically delegates that authority to the mayor, and again, the council also has the ability to delegate that to some other individual, be it the city manager or executive director.
In line with that question, isn't there a problem with somebody signing the document without fully understanding it? I mean, I would think the mayor is faced with that dilemma constantly. We get staff reports, we rely on attorneys. We don't sit here and read these documents from cover to cover.
Actually, that's an interesting question because the mayor can be opposed to it, but if the council approves it, he's required to sign it whether he wants to or not, because he's acting on behalf of the council, which is the way the law is set up.
Does he have to have a thorough understanding of each document that he signs?
This is why we established our risk manager, city attorney, and everyone signing it, and the city clerk to ascertain as a part of her signature that this is an official part of the minutes where the council took the action.
That's correct. And the risk manager and I, as a city attorney, review the documents and authorize basically to ensure that they are legally binding and that the appropriate authority to execute the documents is in place, be it through minute action of the city council or by resolution or ordinance or otherwise.
Well, I don't want to hold up this item here. It's an important item, needs to move forward. I just think that one item we need to look at because it came up so many times in the past.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's go ahead and have a motion. Yeah.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McEachron, second by Councilmember Kennedy.
And for clarity, for the record, this motion includes the delegation for Mr. Metzler to execute on behalf of the City Council, or the Airport Authority in this case.
Correct. That would be my motion. I would imagine that would be
That's my second.
the second.
Motion carries with Councilmember Vyas absent.
I just note that what the mayor is asking for, and I think is an appropriate discussion item in the future, is to have the council briefed publicly about how we just did that and why it protects us, as well as going to the signing of the document, which all that does is ratify what we've already agreed to here on the dais. The signing of a document doesn't mean that you fully understand every if and or shall in the agreement, but it does ratify that we agreed to it. So
correct.
Make no one ever want to be mayor of this city. It's just mind-boggling.
Well,
that's also why you have the risk manager and the city attorney review the documents to deal with those details and ensure that these are legally binding documents and that they're in good legal form as well.
Thank you. Item number 7. Request the City Council, Southern California Logistics Rail Authority, and the Victorville Housing Trust Board approve the changes of the open session meeting as set forth. Didn't we handle that? I guess we didn't, because we didn't adopt the separate resolution.
No, these have not been adopted yet.
Sorry?
These have not been adopted yet.
Okay. Okay. We have a resolution number 13-052, 13-001. You can read the title of the resolutions. Can they be handled by one motion? Madam Clerk, City Attorney, or do you want 3 motions on each one?
One motion approving all 3 items would be appropriate.
Motion by Councilmember Garcia, second by Mayor Pro Tem McEachron. Motion carries with Councilmember Vyas absent.
Item D8, request City Council approve the lead track use permit by and between City of Victorville and Church and Dwight.
Motion by Councilmember Kennedy, second by Mayor Pro Tem McEachron. Motion carries with Councilmember Vyas absent.
Boy, nice job on that one, Sophie.
D9, the Victorville Library item has come up several times. We have a very, very busy library. We have individuals who are volunteering, who are doing a wonderful job. I don't want to see anything happen to the good thing that's happening, but we do have difficulty getting to that because of the private road from 7th Street. I think there was an attempt by staff at one time to get a dedication so we could improve the road. We weren't apparently able to work that out, or at least we haven't been able to work it out so far. To get to the library, you go off 7th and go a roundabout way. And even the appearance of the library has people asking questions because Apple Valley has a new library and Hesperia has a new library. And there's more to it. It wasn't the county that built those necessarily, but I think that a report is needed so the public will understand. And also, just a few years ago, the Victorville City Council elected to withdraw from what is referred to as the county library system. They call it the county free library system. There's nothing free. And I think that because that was a policy decision of the City Council, this council, we have a brand new council, almost brand new staff, we should visit it again to determine if we want to remain separate with a city-owned library, or do we want to consider whether or not to be a part of the county, and what are the pros and cons. Best way to do that is to have a committee, in my opinion. Certainly want to offer, staff is going to be very busy, but if the City Council, number one, do you want to consider it? If you do want to consider it, would a couple of the council members volunteer to serve on that ad hoc committee? Questions?
Councilmember Vyas has expressed a keen interest in this topic over the last couple of years. She's not here to defend herself. I think she'd be an excellent appointment. I would be more than happy to volunteer on that. Unless someone, Gloria, I don't know if you'd like to do it, or Ryan, if you want to do it, fine, but if not, my wife is a very active user of the library. and I'd be happy to help with that.
Mr. Attorney, does he have a never mind. Don't. I was joking. So I assume then that it's, the council agrees that we can have the ad hoc. We're not going to set a time on this. We're not going to rush to get this done, but it's an item that keeps coming up, and I think the public deserves an answer on this. So with council's approval, we will appoint Councilmember Kennedy, Councilmember Valles, get together with Doug. You can determine what staff members can work on this, and we will come back at some time in the future with reports as to what progress is being made. Is that okay?
Mayor Cox, I believe you may have a speaker card on this item.
I'm sorry.
Just been brought to the dais.
Oh, I just got it, I guess, from Hakeem Majil. Sorry about that. I did not see the card.
That's okay. It's an honor to speak to you guys again today. I wanted to express how glad I am to see that this item was placed on your agenda. I, as a member of the Community Services Advisory Committee, know that how important this item is, and me as a member of the committee is definitely looking forward to this action and volunteer my services personal. I can't volunteer the committee, but at the same time, I can speak for myself by saying that this is a wonderful, wonderful act. My son has been hounding me personally. He doesn't really like you that much, Doug. He thinks that you're not doing nothing, but I told him that it's a process and we have to work to get it done, and we'll work together. But he still seems to think that the library is not fixed because of Doug. But I welcome it, and if I could play any role in serving on that committee, I'd definitely volunteer my services because I want to help, and there's a lot of other people that want to help too. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from the staff? Any questions? And thank you. Okay. 10, regional per capita sales. I don't know if the council members are going to have any discussion or ask Mr. Webb to come up, but I want to make a comment. Webb, I have some things to say to you.
Uh-oh. I thought we moved him.
No, I want to say congratulations. Thank you very much. This is past due. We have talked about a start. We have talked about the image of the city. We have talked about code enforcement. We have talked about having a city that we want to make sure that we can avoid some of the pitfalls and problems that we have in the past in the desire to grow and grow big, and I think it's worked against us several times. These comments are pretty hard-hitting, and they needed to be said. Thank you. Thank you very much. Any questions of Mr. Webb? Or comments by other members of council?
No, I think it's a document that helps us move in the right direction.
Item 11, First Amendment to Sublease Amendment Hangar Number 746, Leading Edge Aviation Services.
Motion by Councilmember Kennedy, second by Mayor Pro Tem McEachron. Motion carries with Councilmember Valles absent.
Item number 12, Third Amendment to Easement for Right-of-Way, Kinder Morgan, CalNev Pipeline.
Question, Keith, do I get from this staff report that it's okay with us? In fact, we might even be desirous of having that tank farm removed?
Actually, this transaction is structured the way it is to accommodate the removal of the tank farm, which is immediately at the doorstep of the entrance to SCLA. So Kinder Morgan, CalNev, they're actually undertaking a whole removal and remediation plan as we speak, which includes disconnecting the breakout pipeline from basically the Adelanto breakout station, Adelanto Road breakout station, leading to SCLA. So all of that's a project that's underway, and then eventually these tanks will be removed. The soil will be investigated. If there's remediation necessary, they'll conduct the remediation. So working with them, it's expected that this be done in the time frame allotted under this agreement.
Not relocated.
Not relocated. These tanks are
Removed.
no longer intended to be in use, and it's my understanding that these tanks largely served as breakout for Edwards Air Force Base fueling needs, and because Kinder Morgan is coming through the desert with a new pipeline system, and perhaps because of operational efficiencies they're able to build up the capacity needed to accommodate not only Edwards, but the flows through to McCarran over in Las Vegas.
Other questions? Motion and a second.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McEachron, second by Councilmember Kennedy. Motion carries with Councilmember Vyas absent.
Item number 13. I understand that there's going to be a presentation from staff on this item.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is a follow-up to an item from the last meeting. I know there were some questions about the Riverwalk project, so I'm going to try to keep this brief and then open it up for questions later. I think you have a handout there that has a map of the Riverwalk project, both the one that's planned and the one that was going through the Narrows. I'll explain the difference between the two. If I could go to the next slide. One of the questions was, what is the Riverwalk project? And basically, it's a pedestrian and bicycle path. Most of it's going to be about 12 feet wide, and there will be some bike lanes on streets also. It's going to connect on one end Victor Valley College, which is there's going to be one terminus at Bear Valley Road at Victor Valley College. It will continue up to the Mojave Narrows Regional Park and eventually to the Victorville Transportation Center at 6th Street and D, and then also connect with the existing Riverwalk path that was built a few years back. And that path is along the Mojave River between I-15 and 6th Street. So the total length of this project would be about 7.7 miles. That's the project that's currently in environmental development. And the plan is to build the first segment, which would be about 3.5 miles long from Victor Valley College. It'd be on top of the levee next to the Mojave River. That levee goes adjacent to Spring Valley Lake, and then it would go up into the Mojave Narrows Regional Park with a turnaround. And that's the first segment that would be planned. Now, there was a plan to go through the Narrows. Unfortunately, that plan had to be abandoned for this particular environmental document. That was about a 2.5 mile stretch that went from the Mojave Narrows Park through the Narrows and continued along the river up to eventually I-15. Well, there were some challenges associated with that effort. One of the main challenges was BNSF. BNSF took a strong position that they would not allow any kind of a path in their right-of-way, and the right-of-way actually extends out into the river itself. So the only other option was go on the other side of the river, the east side of the river, over by the Lewis Center, which would mean bridging across the river, and then getting another bridge to get on the other side. It's possible, it could be done, but there were also environmental challenges too. The studies showed that there probably are a lot of cultural resources on that other side that would have to be mitigated. Again, it's not impossible, but it would be very challenging. So that could be a follow-up project, but it's not part of this environmental document. There are a number of environmental studies have been completed. I'm not going to go through them all, but basically all the technical studies have been recently completed, but there's going to be a considerable time before the environmental document is approved. The reason is because it has to be drafted, it has to go to the review process with Caltrans. They have oversight on this because it's a federally funded project potentially. And so there's the public review time, the CEQA and NEPA approval, all that adds up to more time than we would like. So I'll get into the schedule a little bit later. I don't expect you to look at all the funding sources on this slide. This is the funding on the project. There have been a number of different fund sources over the years. Those funds for the environmental effort have been basically expended. There was some additional funding a couple years ago, another $150,000, $75,000 from Sandbags, $75,000 from the county. Since that time, there were some more environmental snags that took a little more time, more study work. So that's why we were requesting additional funds to complete the environmental document. All told, the total funding for this whole environmental effort has been about $3 million. And it was initiated well over 10 years ago. So some of these federal funds were authorized over a decade ago, actually. One thing to keep in mind, and I really want to emphasize this, is that the LTF funds that we're requesting, they can only be used for pedestrian and bicycle activities and transit. They can't be used for road maintenance, overlays, fixing potholes, et cetera, things like that. So it has a restricted use, and the funding that we're requesting at this time would not negatively impact other things we have planned for that LTF money. Another thing to note is because there were federal funds initially used on the environmental phase, if this does not go eventually to construction, at least some segment of it goes to construction, there would be a risk of repaying those federal funds. The Federal Highway Administration could impose a repayment of those funds. So that's something just to keep in mind.
A repayment of which funds?
Well, there were
the funds, the grants for environmental studies?
Exactly. There were federal funds, there were T21 funds that were authorized, and those would be at risk of repayment. I don't know what that risk is, but I know that on some projects it actually has happened. They have required repayment.
That's the one that says we have about $761,000 that has been reimbursed. That's the T21 funds that we've received?
Yes.
Am I following that right?
Yes, that's right. Exactly. Okay.
Before you get too far, BNSF says you can't use the railroad right-of-way to come through the upper narrows. And so the discussion was to cross the river. Did I hear you say that?
Yes. The only other option would be to actually build a bridge, cross the river on the other side. Then you'd have to go through the narrows under the two bridges that, there's Highway 18 and the Mineral Bridge, and then cross again to the other side.
Wouldn't have to cross the BNSF right away again?
You would. You'd have to bridge over that to get over to. No, actually, you wouldn't. You would not. I'm sorry. I stand corrected. You would not, because you'd already be past where the BNSF diverged from the river, where you would bridge over. You wouldn't have to bridge over BNSF.
Okay. That's right, because the BNSF line is west of this Riverwalk at this point.
If there aren't any other questions, I'll go to the next slide, and then I'll open it up for questions at the end. But feel free to ask questions as I go. I don't expect you to be able to see that map very well, but there are two related projects, the Yucca Loma project and Yates Road widening. Those are in progress right now. Actually, it's being bid, and there's a bid opening scheduled in October. And that would include building a new bridge over the Mojave River, widening Yates Road up to the park entrance. And Apple Valley estimates that the construction will start in early 2014. It'll end sometime in around the end of 2016. So those two projects, the reason they're related is they will have bike paths. The bridge will have a separate bike path going across. Yates Road will have a graded area to accommodate a bike path, and basically you just have to put asphalt on it, and you could have a bike path next to Yates Road. The Green Tree Extension Project is further into the future. We're about ready to finalize a contract for that. It has to go through a process, a review process before we take it to council, but probably the design will start late this year. It'll probably take about 2 years to complete the design. When it will go to right-of-way and construction, we don't know, because right now there's not a funding source, but eventually that is also planned to have a bike path in Green Tree that would go to Asperia Road. So that would be one of the segments of this project that's currently.
Is that why that red line, Brian, crosses sort of where Code Road is and then down Hesperia Road? That'll be a bike path.
Yes, it'll have bike paths, lanes in the road next to the curb.
But it's not literally part of the Riverwalk.
Well, see,
part of the project.
Let me back up here a little bit and explain why this alternative path is going down Green Tree and Asperia Road to Old Town. It has to do with the environmental process. There had to be a terminus established at one end up in Old Town and a terminus at the other end at Bear Valley. Because the segment that goes through the Narrows was abandoned, it still had to go from point to point. The only way to get from Old Town to VVC was going on this other path, and that was the path that was chosen. And while it diverges from the river, and maybe that part really isn't a river walk, it had to be included in the environmental document to satisfy the federal requirements.
I think that then takes me to the question of why is there a break in the red line that is the bike path down there in the
park? Yeah, I can explain that. I didn't really like the way the graphic showed that. The reason is there's already a little path there there's a lake inside the park, and there's already a path there, and it'd be connecting to the path, and so really it'd go all the way through.
But doesn't that route give you the two termini?
Not according to our friends who are reviewing the environmental document. So we had to satisfy their requirements. I'll move on to the next slide. The next steps. The schedule we estimate is early in 2015 you'd have an approved environmental document for NEPA and CEQA. In the summer of 2015 you could have a design completed for segment 1, that'd be from VVC to Mojave Narrows Park. But we need to secure construction money. Right now, that money is not available. I think at the last meeting, Doug made reference to $6.2 million that was set aside, but it's not available anymore because it was part of the previous transportation bill, which expired. It was part of the safety in lieu bill. But now there's a whole different way of funneling this money for bicycle and pedestrian projects, and it is a priority project with Sandbag, and they seem to think that they will find construction money, but right now it hasn't been identified. So for this actually to proceed to construction, that would be a crucial step, is to get grant money through Sandbag. And I'm open for any questions you might have.
At the time this was, the planning began, it terminated at the Transit Center on D Street, 6th Street. At one time, that was the center of transit activities, and that's no longer the case. Or is it just my observation that it's no longer the case?
As far as the activities going on at the transit
Well,
center?
where the mass transit, they seem to accumulate now on by Costco, where all the buses come in, and that's where they seem to go out and run in and out from that point. I have been at the transit center several times. I didn't see a lot of activities there in regard to the transit. I wondered if that changes some of the reasons that the terminus was chosen to be there. The next question, that if you're going to build a bridge across the river for the bikes, it seems to me it'd be easier to build a bridge across the tracks just above the Narrows and come in at by the cemetery and have bike trails on the streets and it would be easy to get into, on the city streets, to 6th and E or C, well, wherever that transit center is. Have they considered that, or would that be a brand-new environmental study?
Well, unfortunately, this other segment, this 2.5 mile skip from the park to basically D and 6th Street, would be another environmental document, but that's an interesting alternative. We could consider that.
Problem is, it'd take another 16 years to get to environmental.
Is there any possibility this project will bring the transit center to life?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I could answer that as no, it really wouldn't. The transit center would be nice to have it along this path, but it's not intended to be the reason for the Riverwalk project.
Some of these, they call them activity centers along the way, like the college, the transit center, and so forth. They help you score points, basically, to get federal funds for projects like this. And there may not be a direct nexus, like Doug said, between the transit center, but it helps secure funding.
I'm kind of getting the impression that we're so invested in this that we almost can't back out of it.
Right, yeah,
And
I
that's
was just going to
making me
say,
kind
you know,
of
unfortunately, the thought of spending this money at the cost of completing some sort of environmental process, it's less costly than if we don't do it because of the amount that we would owe back to the federal government. But in the time that we've had this discussion, Arizona's probably completed 3 of these projects. That's what's the most frustrating part. I mean, what we have to go through in this state to build a river walk, they would have had done by now. This is just, I don't know how many years this thought's been in the process. Jim, you probably have a better idea.
Well, it's been a long time. It's complicated. I know the initial intent was to start at the transit center and follow the closest point from A to B to college by going through the Narrows and so on. If that can't occur, you either cross the river or cross the tracks. And if you cross the, cost-wise, it'd be easier to cross the tracks at the Narrows, going direct westerly until you connected into, what was that, C Street, D-C? And then follow C Street over and into the Narrows. I mean, there's already a street there. You could put a bike lane in there. It wouldn't be expensive to do, but I don't know if that's enough change. If that causes a change and a new environmental studies, then our goal would probably be to complete this prior to the California speed bullet train being completed. And we might not make it then. But yeah, Mr. Kennedy's comments are interesting. We've spent so much time, invested so much money that I think we have outside agencies saying you will either, the implication is you will either bring this to fruition or give the money back. I'd kind of like to know, well, council members, questions. What we have is an item before the city council that's heard the comment that was a grant for $6.5 million? No, what was that grant for?
Well, there were a number of grants. The item before us tonight is actually to request some additional LTF money, the city's local transportation fund, to appropriate another $150,000, which we hope and can never have complete confidence in would complete the environmental document. From what we know now, that would give us enough money to have an approved environmental document.
And Brian, again, to your point, we can only spend those dollars on this type of project.
On pedestrian, bicycle, or transit uses, yes.
Well, if Apple Valley is going to be moving ahead with a extension of Yucca to Yates at Spring Valley Lake, and if there's any plans for Yates Road to continue westerly, I suppose now would be the time to indicate pedestrian and bicycle right-of-way on that new road in construction. But that would just get you to Hesperia Road. It wouldn't advance us northerly. Well, We have an action item that we put off. We have an item from the staff with recommendations that was put off so we could have this discussion. So staff or council, what is your desire?
Mr. Mayor, I don't have the screen in front of me, but I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve item D13.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McEachron, second by Councilmember Garcia. Motion carries with Councilmember Vyas absent.
This was 2 yes and 2 reluctant. I could hear the discussions going on. I'm telling you, I'm very reluctant to do this because I do not see a solution to getting through the Narrows. I do see an alternative route, and following Code Road to Hesperia and all the way down, certainly not a preferred way, which means that eventually we're going to have an alternative study for the environmental studies, and I'm betting that that's across the tracks and go into C Street at the cemetery.
It's just hard to see a bike route through Old Town the way that it's laid out. It's across what, Verde and across 7th Street to 6th and down. Oh my gosh, what a...
I know, I know. There are a lot of individuals that want to see this. Of course, there's a lot of individuals who would like to see us clean up the river bottom, too. And this is very complicated, very difficult. You have other entities that want this. You have other entities funding it. You had this past city council, as I understand it, city clerk 100% committed to this project. Substantial monies have been expended. And I don't think there's any member of this council that's willing to move ahead unless we fully understand it, number one. And number two, we aren't willing to just stop the project and then take the chance of having to pay substantial dollars back to previous funding agencies. So it's complicated. We've taken action recommended by staff, but there's a lot more questions, and I'm sure the city manager has listened carefully, and we'll have more discussions on this in the future. Thank you very much, staff, for this information. Item 14, request City Council approve we settled that, didn't we?
Yes, that has been acted on.
Okay, City Council discussion, D15, for council discussion, possible action, property tax and sales tax revenues.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we've been talking since May and June about the police chief's desire to add 2 police officers, 2 sheriff's deputy positions beginning October 1st. We even had an action about a month ago that added them to the contract, but to remain vacant until such time as we could have a discussion and an update on our property tax and ultimately sales tax revenue as well. As expected, our property tax last year came in significantly higher than what we had budgeted. We were conservative, and it proved out to be a wise move. In studying it, however, what we also learned was that sales tax, although it is up higher than it was last year or was higher than the year prior, was not as high as we had originally projected at the beginning of that budget cycle. So as proud as we are, or as happy we are that the property tax monies came in higher, unfortunately there's an offset with the sales tax coming in lower, and for those reasons I can't recommend an increase to our revenue projections at this point in time. I'd like to believe that they will continue to go up, but being conservative, I can't recommend an increase. Among the other good news in your fourth quarter financial reports was, as Councilmember Kennedy brought up, there was, I think, close to $700,000 in revenue over expenditures. Of that, about half of it is from sales tax and property tax, monies that were excess last year that we did not spend because they came in higher. Taking that into account, should the council wish to still fill those positions at this time, beginning effectively October 1st, although it may not be exactly October 1st, you could opt to use those dollars from essentially last year's budget, carry them forward, rebudget them, or budget them for the first time really in this case, as an additional appropriation, and put the money into this year's budget to fund those positions. The risk in doing that is that there's no guarantee that we will have those funds again this current fiscal year. Should we get to the end of this fiscal year and not have a significant enough increase in property tax and sales tax, we may have to make cuts in other areas, assuming you would want to retain those two sheriff's deputies positions. So it's kind of laying it out there as bluntly as I can, and kind of tossing it into your laps as to what you'd prefer to do.
Is the revenue and expense plan for next year similar to the final results, or the results as final as they are now for 12-13?
It is, yes. We didn't have significant movement. A little bit of increase that we had in revenues. We also had a little bit of an increase in expenses as well. Every year we do have, at least every year that I've been here, we've had a fairly significant amount of revenues over expenses, simply because it's difficult to spend every single dime that comes in. You don't know exactly how much is coming in. And we turn the screws pretty tightly onto the departments when we get close to the end of the year to make sure that they aren't just simply spending for the case of spending money. So we ultimately do end up with a positive net balance at the end of each fiscal year.
Well, I'm not bothered by having a surplus. I think we need to get back into a reserve building mode. And if we're looking at a $700,000 surplus, half of that can go to build reserves, half can go to fund those two positions. I'm inclined to make that commitment and hold your feet to the fire next year.
We'll do our best. We always do.
What is the funding for those two positions?
Those two positions are $280,260.
$280,260?
Yes.
We are in the unfortunate situation that we can use more officers probably than what we can afford. In fact, I'm sure we can. And they do a great job. But we have seen certain segments of this community and what it's turned into, and I think with the actions that the council has been undertaking with code enforcement and several other things, I think things will get better. I have my fingers crossed, but certainly to the Sheriff's Department for all the hard work they're doing, well, I would just find it, can afford it, we need.
I agree. I think we sent the message, and I think our reliance was on the property tax figures. I understand the sales tax didn't come in where we wanted it to be, but I still continue to hear good things about our sales tax dollars, especially with Walmart. We got another one on its way. The car dealers are seeing record sales like they haven't in years. So I'm just relying upon some of those types of things that I'm hearing out there in the community. I think this is a risk well worth taking.
I agree with that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second.
Motion by Mayor Pro Tem McEachron, second by Councilmember Kennedy.
Just to clarify, this would be an additional appropriation using leftover funds from last year in an amount of $280,260 to go into the general fund to pay for those police positions.
Motion carries with Councilmember Baez absent.
Thank you. We are now at that point where we will have the public comments on items of interest to the public. We still have the same rules, still have 3 minutes. I am taking the cards in order that I received them. At this point, I have 4 cards. First would be Mr. Joe Vale.
Good evening. I'm sure that my being here doesn't really make a lot of difference, but I wanted to come and make a statement concerning my just displeasure with the way the City Council did the thing with the street lighting project. It's my understanding when the vote was taken, the people voted no. but because you, the city council, control 712 parcels of our taxpayer dollar money, that made the proposition pass. That's unethical. I talked to Howard Jarvis Tax Group concerning this issue, and he went through the records and found that what you did was not illegal, but it was unethical. And I want to remind you of what your little sign up here says, "In God we trust." God keeps records, and he keeps records of ethics, or the lack thereof. Rarely do you see me at a city council meeting. I've lived here since 1965. I've known Jim Cox since probably 66 or 67. And I imagine if he went back and counted on his hand the number of times I've been at city council meetings, you could do it on probably 2 hands or less. The only time I show up is when I see something that I think is being done is incorrect or hurting people who live here in town who are struggling for economics. If you look around the old part of town, you'll find that there are many properties that need to be upgraded, improved. Can't be done because City Hall is too expensive. Cost of repairs and cost of upgrading cost too much money. I've recently spent a lot of money remodeling a house that I have, and I've spent a lot of money here at City Hall just to get permission to spend more money to do my job. And ethics are important. Maybe not to some of you, but they are to me. Good day.
Thank you, Joe. Next would be Wally Lynn.
Mayor Cox, council members, and staff. I'm here to officially invite your your support and attendance for the third annual God and Country Celebration Breakfast to be held out at the Heiligmeier Warehouse building out there. It took 18 months to find a facility large enough to accommodate this crowd. Some of you may remember we started this 3 years ago. We had 900 people at the fairgrounds, and next year we had 900 plus 500 in another building. And I didn't want to do this again until we found a facility large enough to accommodate a large crowd. This year we will have the largest crowd in the history of the high desert and most likely the state of California for this type of an event. It's very, very exciting. We're going to have 100 tables of high school kids. We're going to bus in from 14 different schools, and then another 100 tables for the adult community, and plus another 4 tables for the military. We will have, again, the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps participating in the opening ceremony. And we've put together a program that is absolutely fantastic. Again, we'll have Azusa Pacific University Choir and Orchestra visiting with us, 120 strong, and they are fabulous. They circle the room and begin to sing, and it gets very exciting very quickly. High school students participate in this thing. We have over about 200 high school kids that will participate in the program in one form or another. And then we have a speaker coming this year that is absolutely fantastic also. And most of you have heard of Black Hawk Down, the helicopter pilot that was shot down in Somalia, Michael Duran. He was rescued by a guy that is our speaker, Major Jeff Struker. And what a story this guy has to tell about what he went through rescuing these troops, having his men shot, and he was shot, 2 Purple Hearts himself. Our men were, shot in the streets, hung from bridges, and it's too bad that every kid in the high desert couldn't hear this message, because it is just phenomenal. And the purpose here is to inspire our youth and to encourage our youth from a Judeo-Christian perspective, and to remind them the blood that was shed for our freedom, because they're not getting this message, at least in my opinion, as they leave high school. And most of them have not been exposed to military and don't really study or have not studied American history sufficiently to where they really appreciate what freedom is all about.
Wally.
Thank you. So anyway, tables are $250. Each city has in the past purchased 1 or 2 tables. It's a very popular event, and so we invite you to attend and support the thing. And flyers have been left for your convenience to participate.
Thank you, Wally.
Thank you very much.
This is not on his time, but this is Thursday, November 7, 2013, 7 to 9 a.m. at 10200 Armagosa Road, Hesperia, the former Elick Myers building.
And we're on the internet too, Mayor.
You will hear from us.
Yeah, thank you.
Next is Chuck and Pat Henson. Hello and welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening, Mayor Cox and City Council members. My name is Chuck Hanson, and this is my lovely wife, Pat Hanson. And we're here to talk about a fun bike ride, and it's good and healthy. And we have started a 10-mile ride that a lot of that have served up to before have requested. So we'd like to see all of you doing it. And one comment on the Riverwalk, one thing I've tried to point out for years, that the more a city does for bicyclists, the more people that get out of cars. We think that's a good thing. Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members, and members of the dais. We're happy to present our 6th annual Tour to Apple Valley bike ride. This will take place on October 19th, Saturday. Registration is from 7 in the morning till 8. The ride starts at 8. We have 3 distances this year. As Chuck said, we have a 10-mile ride, which is what most people have asked for because, like me, we are not used to riding bicycles, and so if we can go a short distance, we can get ourselves into that kind of we can get ourselves into condition to go at least a 10-mile ride. Chuck averages a 15-mile ride 3 days a week. He's going to be 83 years old on Monday. So it does help in conditioning your system. We have a website, tdav.org, has all the particulars, and we have as of last year, created our own 501c3, so we are responsible for whatever happens. And so come on out and bring your money and ride your bikes. The other rides we have are 31 miles, which is what we call a half metric distance. And the metric distance, which is like metric 100, is 62 miles. So we have 3 rides. 62 miles, 31 miles, or 10 miles. And so you can take your choice and pay your fee. On the 10-mile ride, it's $25. If you have 2 adults paying $25 each, their kids can ride free. Helmets are required for every rider. And I want to make read a couple of sentences out of a Bicycle magazine, a study done that says people who ride their bikes to work will encourage others to ride their bikes to work, which exaggerates what Chuck just said. The more people who ride, the more people will ride. And they found that the major reason for not riding bicycles was the lack of bike lanes. Terrain, weather, any other condition was not as valid an excuse for not riding as the lack of bike lanes. And so our thrust with our ride is to help provide funding to the local communities to provide bike lanes as a safety feature. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very
hope
much.
To see you.
Thank you.
Hope to see you out there.
Next card is Hakeem Majel.
Hello, everybody, again. Mr. Mayor, that's Majid. You nailed it at the beginning at first, and now you're going away. But no, first, let me thank you, Mr. Mayor, and you, Mr. Mayor Pro Temp, for your quick response to my request to speak to the children at my after-school program, the after-school program where my children attend. Your warm response and your quick response is greatly appreciated, and I want to personally thank you both Keston said that he had messages waiting on him. So again, thank you, and I know the children will benefit from your presence and what you can tell them and show them. The second thing I want to say is offer kudos to you, to the mayor and council, for having the courage to fund those 2 police positions. That means a lot to the community that's out there. Me personally, public safety is always something important that I watch. You know, if you look under my feet, you'll see roots. I purchased my house here, and I'm not going anywhere, and I know that a lot of people did, and it's important for them to feel safe. So thank you very much for doing that. The third thing I want to talk about was the name tags for community advisory committee members and commissioners. I don't know if that was that. I don't know if that could be followed up upon, or maybe I'll just call and check with you on that at a later time. And then the Mojave River Walk. As I sit back and I was listening, it sounded like you guys are kind of getting bullied in the sense that so much has been committed, and I mean, 10-year-old funding, and I can understand Mayor Cox's reluctancy. I would really encourage you guys to really take your time and look at that. I know a lot of people have their hands in it. I know that it's big, but just sitting from the outside looking in, it often seems like you guys are being pushed a certain direction. So just keep that in mind, and I thank you, and good night.
Thank you. Next item is discussion and possible action regarding items for the upcoming City Council agenda. Any items from the council members? Any items from staff? Nope. Report from the city manager?
Just a brief report. We've got myself and Mr. Metzler and one staff member who will be attending the International Shopping Center show for essentially the remainder of the week. We'll be here for part of the day tomorrow and then heading to that show and hoping to bring additional retailers to our fair city.
Okay.
And one other thing, it's unfortunate the Hansons left, but I'm currently scheduled to be out of town on the 19th of October, trying to change that actually earlier today. If I can get that changed, I'd be proud to represent the city and the city council, since I don't think any of you are going to be hopping on your bikes for this thing, hoping to do my first metric century, the 62-mile course this October.
I'd appreciate that. I was going to ride a bike. I do have a bike, but they don't have a half-a-mile ride.
If you would prefer, Mr. Mayor, if you'd prefer, you can ride that 62-miler with me.
They don't have a half mile. That's about probably all I can do. Any other comments from staff? Reports from council members? We'll start with Mr. Kennedy.
Just one, and it's an update on the capital project situation at VVWRA. As all of you know, I'm the Victorville representative. That's the Victor Valley Wastewater Reclamation Authority. That is a joint powers authority consisting of Apple Valley, Hesperia, Victorville, and the county that provide our regional sewage collection and treatment. We are having continuing discussions about improvement and replacement projects relating to the interceptors, the main lines that our trunk lines feed that take waste to the treatment plant, and the construction of the sub-regional scalping plants in Hesperia and Apple Valley. This has been an ongoing discussion. After our last council meeting, Mayor Cox sent a letter to all member agencies and VVWRA staff expressing his and my concern, as well as the City of Victorville staff concern about the financial plan to fund these projects. Our major concerns expressed in the mayor's letter were the reliability of the cost estimates for some projects, since some of those estimates have changed dramatically from meeting to meeting over the last few months, and the methodology used by the VVWRA staff to allocate these costs between the needs of existing users and the needs relating to future development. Very important letter that we sent, important to express those concerns. I believe that the concerns expressed in the mayor's letter are also shared by other member agencies. I believe these concerns are being taken seriously and that the financial plan is being studied and reworked in response to these concerns. So I thank VVWRA staff for that. I think it is accurate to say that the financial plan is still on the drawing board. And as things develop, I'll keep you informed.
Thank you. Kekron.
Yeah, just two things. I will be representing the city because I don't believe any of the rest of you are going up the California League of Cities in Sacramento, which going to Sacramento is always a joyous occasion, I'm sure, for any of us. And then also, I'm assuming that they're still on track, but I believe that the La Mesa Nisqually interchange will be fully open starting next week. Told the 23rd. Hopefully they can keep to that. I don't know if staff's got any other information to that level. Brian, are you going to come and tell me something bad? Should have asked you beforehand.
I don't make those kinds of predictions anymore.
I saw them. I saw them spray painting today, but it was the dirt. It wasn't the lanes. So
The latest I heard, it was supposed to open on the 25th.
Okay.
But I wouldn't be surprised if that slipped, but I know that they're pushing very hard to open the ramps by the 25th.
Right. It's all about striping the lanes. So, but it's supposed to be next week, is what I've been told.
Yes, that's my
No longer
understanding.
about asphalt.
Well, it's up.
It's not about asphalt anymore.
It's so busy, I'm going to have to take Valley Road.
That's all.
Councilmember Garcia.
I have nothing.
The only item that I have, Mr. Vail had raised an interesting question about the city voting its properties. I had made an inquiry to staff, and I'm sorry I didn't remember the detail that while we had a lot of properties, we didn't have that many votes because of the, you don't get a vote just because you have a little piece of property. But I would, sometime when staff is looking at that data, I doubt that they have the answers right now. I think that we all got a resolution. I think we all got from the city clerk what the breakdown on the votes were. I'd just like to see it again. That. I have no other comments. Any questions of staff? No members? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.